In this video, we'll be talking about how to set signal properties within Aquarius. So signal properties, what do we mean by that? Legacy whiteboards, so all whiteboards that were saved in Aquarius 2.6 or older, they didn't have the ability to set things like parameters or units or time zones. So now that we have that feature available in 2.7 and newer versions of Aquarius, what we can do is basically go through legacy whiteboards, if we wish to do so, and set all of those settings like parameters, units, time zones. There's actually two ways that we can do this. We can either go through each of those output ports and right-click on each of those. So for example, we can right-click on this wire, this output port, go to the signal properties feature, and then the port properties for that data set opens up. And then what we can do is scroll down and set all of these undefined new features in this pane. So that's one option. If I cancel out of this, the other option is to go to the tools and go to set all signal properties. And what this will do is list all of the output ports from the whiteboard in a list, and then you can basically scroll through them and set all of those undefined time zones, parameters, units, and gap tolerance. And notice that as I scroll through these, there's a red kind of color that appears on the output port, so you know which one you're actually changing. Okay, so how do we actually set these properties now? Basically, what we need to do is select that time series or rating measurement or rating curve, the HydroML. What we can do is basically select that and then select each of those kind of parameters that we want to set. For example, time zone, we can select that. Right now it's red because it's undefined, but we can hit the dot 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 button and select from the list of time zones. So for example, I can select Pacific Standard Time, hit the OK button, and now that is set. So it's UTC minus 8 hours. And I can basically do that for all of these undefined parameters, units, and also the gap tolerance as well. So again, the procedure is the same. I can basically select that, hit the dot 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 button, and search the database. So for example, this is my stage. Hit OK, and then it will ask me what is the actual units. Now notice that right now I have a question mark next to my units, and the question mark basically comes from the uncertainty of what it was, because it used to be a text entry. So we used to have to type in, for example, the feet or inches or the meters. So that was text, but right now, because it's actually going to a database and setting it, it's just confirming what is it that you actually want to set. So in this case, I don't want to change it to meters, so I hit no. So what I want to do is actually select feet from the drop-down menu, and then it will say, do you want to set it to FT, which is feet? Yes, and now it will actually set it to feet. So the last thing to actually talk about is gap tolerance. And gap tolerance is basically when do we recognize a gap as a gap, and when do we basically realize that it's not a gap in the data set and it should be interpolated between that kind of last data point and the first data point. So the gap tolerance is basically the kind of tolerance in minutes of when we want Aquarius to recognize it as a gap. So in this case, I'm going to select 60 minutes, and it's going to say, do you want to redo the gap processing on this data set, or do you want to just set it for future reference? So in this case, I don't want to reprocess that gap, that data set with that new gap tolerance. I just want to leave it for future reference. So I'm going to hit no. And now it's actually set that gap tolerance for future reference as 60. And that's basically how to set the signal properties on legacy whiteboards.